Our Starlink went down for a full week. So we had service at Peach Fork, the harvest host we were at, and then we drove to Ballard, and Ballard was the first time we didn't have working internet, and then that lasted all the way through Moab. You know, I put up a short the other day of how we're tethering the tripod down now for the dish, and one of the reasons we did that is early on we thought it was the dish. We thought that we had a couple of windstorms, one in Florida, one in Colorado, and I think one somewhere else where there was enough wind that it took that dish and it tumbled to the ground. So it's 6 feet up and it took a tumble down. What I said in the intro is our Starlink went down. Emily mentioned it and talked about getting back online while we were in Salt Lake City. But I want to walk through the steps of this, like what happened and what our service experience was. Ballard RV Park in Thompson Springs was the first time that we knew there was a problem. And then we put in a ticket there. That was on August 26th. And we moved to Dead Horse State Park on the 27th. At Dead Horse State Park, we had limited cell service, which meant that Emily, to make sure she had a good internet connection, was driving into Moab 35 minutes every day. I was having to go to the visitor center pretty frequently to see if we had emails about the Starlink or anything like that. Emily, on the 29th, goes to Moab to work and sends me a text message that they have responded to the ticket. So that's all within the app, the Starlink app. And because Emily and I share the account, Emily was able to see that. I happened to have been at the visitor center when Emily sent that text message. So she was in Moab and I was at Dead Horse Point, and I just happened to be there when she sent it. They asked for a couple of additional photos, which I went in and took, and then walked back to the visitor center. I should say we're about a half a mile walk from the visitor center. So I sent off those pictures, and right when I sent those pictures off, the customer support guy called. And again, luckily I was at the visitor center and had a connection when that happened. And he started going through kind of what he thought the problem was. So the first thing he says to me is that he can see our satellite dish. So the satellite dish has power and he can see it, so it can't be the dish, is his thinking. The next thing he says is that he thinks it's a cable, but very quickly looks at our account and notices we just bought a new cable and comes to the conclusion that it can't be the cable. So his thought is it is the router that is creating the problem. So we talked for a few minutes, and because we're at Dead Horse Point and can't really get mail there, we're trying to figure out where along our route we can get our next mail service. The best option is really to hit the spot after Lincoln, Nebraska, which is Kansas City. And in Kansas City, I found a UPS store that was willing to receive them for us and hand them off to us. So thanks to, I think his name was Robert at that store, who helped us out with that. I now have a router coming to us in Kansas City, which is about 7 days out. So the following day, we leave Dead Horse Point and we head to Salt Lake City. We were staying at Utah Lake State Park, and really just made the call that we needed to figure out a way to get high-speed internet. We'd already looked at a couple of different solutions, and I'll talk about those in a few minutes, and determined that really, based on feedback from people from Airstream addicts, from escapees, and just kind of researching on YouTube and Reddit, really our best option for a high-speed connection was to have a backup Starlink system. We left the campground, we went and got dinner, and then stopped at Best Buy to pick up a second Starlink system. When we arrived back, we went through multiple configurations. The idea here was we wanted to find out what our problem was rather than just replace the system. So we went through, I think, 4 iterations of setup. The first was setting up the new system and not using the smart plug or the internal cable. And in that setup, everything functioned. So we knew the new system worked without the smart plug and without the original cable that we had. Now we know the new system works and we need to go identify problems. The first step in that is to hook the new system into the smart plug and use the smart plug and internal cable. And again, everything functions, no issues. So now we know that the new system works fine and we know that the smart plug and the internal cable have no issues. So the next step in our troubleshooting is to use our old dish. So we take the new dish off, we put the old dish on, and boot everything up, and everything works just fine. So at this point, we know it's not the dish, we know it's not the smart plug or the internal cable. Our next step is to replace the router. So the router is, again, that's what they're sending us as a replacement because that's what they've diagnosed the problem as. We replace the router, and now we're old dish, old router. We're using the smart plug and the internal cable. So the only thing new at this point is the new cable that came out of the new system. We've now diagnosed it. We now know that the only problem in the entire setup was this cable that we had just purchased. So the cable is no more than a month old and shows no sign of wear or of anything broken. And I'll show you the ends of the cable. I'm not gonna like walk inch by the whole cable, but I've gone through the cable. There's no signs that anything was wrong with the cable. The pins are all intact, everything looks good. We were aware that cables could fail, but in our mind, the cable that was going to fail was the cable that was 4 months old and in use every day, that had been, slammed in a door and all kinds of stuff, not the brand new cable that had only been taken out 2 or 3 times. So at this point, we have a functioning system using nothing new except for that new cable. And because we've now been able to identify that it's a cable problem, I went ahead and emailed customer service to let them know that the router wasn't necessary, that we have identified it as the cable problem, and that's all we really need to do to fix the system. Customer service at that point says, great, we're gonna send you a cable. And then I quickly responded with, you can not send the router. But at that point, I guess they were too far gone. They had to send the router. I guess it was too far through the system and they were gonna send it anyway. I wanted to tell that story because it kind of highlights what customer service with Starlink looked like for us. It took 72 hours from our initial ticket going in to getting a response. And that one instance where I updated the ticket, the guy called me almost immediately. I think the second part of that is that we were another day in between that and diagnosing what the real problem was. And when I responded to the ticket then, they were also very quick to respond to it. So I don't know if there's like a lag in the ticket queue, or they've got like a lot of things going on. And so it takes them a couple of days to pick up a ticket. But that was our experience, 72 hours from initial ticket to response, and then they were very quick at that point. I think the other thing I'll say as a positive note is that anytime we identified that there was a problem, they were very quick to replace that part. So the next thing we want to get into is what were our possible solutions for a backup service. So as far as backup systems go, we looked at WeBoost, which we have seen at Overland Expo a couple years running here. And it was something that we considered, but ultimately decided that it didn't serve a great deal of purpose for us, because when we have cell service, we tend to have decent cell service. And when we don't, a WeBoost isn't going to help amplify a non-existent signal anyway. We might be wrong on that. Like, let us know if it's worked for you. The second option was a dedicated like AT&T cellular router or a Verizon cellular router. And in this case, we'd probably do Verizon because our phones are with AT&T. So just to have a second option. We decided against that because, similar to the WeBoost conversation, we were in Dead Horse Point State Park and had no cell service. So we didn't think that was gonna solve our problem. We looked at TravelFi. And if you're unfamiliar with TravelFi, it's a multiple carrier router. So it'll hit like T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon. It looks at the spectrum of all different carriers. Our decision not to get TravelFi or the cellular modems really was based on cost benefit, really, if you want to look at it that way. I guess what I'm curious about is If you use Starlink, have you had outages? Have you had like an outage that was not hardware related? Have you had a router go out? Have you had a cable go bad? I know of several people that have had cables go bad, but let us know in the comments, have you had issues? And are you reliant on it like we are? Or is it something where you had a backup, you knew that you needed a backup and you had that backup? I'm curious if you use Starlink, is your backup a cell modem? We're interested in Amazon's competitor to Starlink, but it's not out yet. So that's not an option at this point. I think had we been somewhere with cell service, it probably would have been less of an ordeal because we could have tethered to our phones and been able to do that. Yeah, leave your comments. Let us know, is Starlink your primary? If it is your primary, do you have a secondary? Do you carry extra Starlink equipment in case something does fail? Thanks for watching. Stick with us. We're heading into get service for the Airstream. We're super excited we've got 3 services scheduled right now. And we're super excited about all 3 of them, but stick with us. We hope you watch more videos.